Today we'll feature a 21-year-old man whose mother still cuts his toenails, a husband who doesn't want to tattoo his kids' names on his skin, how much contact is too much contact with your ex, and more. Let's start with the nail cutting. This thread is titled Cutting Nails? So, I live with my boyfriend and we have a baby together. I'm 20 and he's 21. And he has his mom cut his toenails and fingernails. He has told me to cut them, but I refuse because he's not a child. Isn't that weird? Recently, she just came into our room to cut his nails and leave. So weird. I've even told him, why doesn't he cut his own nails? And he tells me that he asks his mom for that. It literally bothers me. It makes me cringe. I always tell him to cut his own, but he doesn't. WTF. A while back, I also recall when his own mom was telling me to cut his nails, saying that I should be doing whatever she was doing back when I wasn't here. I don't, though. Okay. This is probably one of the grossest threads that I've come across. At the very least, it's a little bit bizarre, and I don't think anyone will be surprised to know that the vast majority of people on the internet react the same way. As you can see, the top comment is, "That's repulsive. I'm sorry, you do not have to cut his nails." But I think it's actually indicative of a couple of bigger problems. On the one hand, it's the kind of relationship that he has with his mom, and part of motherhood is kind of growing with your kids as they get older, and the demands on you as a mother should be changing throughout the course of their life, because being a mother to an infant is very different from being a mother to a teenager and from being a mother to an adult. The aspect of this that's kind of so insidious and really, really harmful is that he, as a man, as a 21-year-old man, which is still relatively young, but he has his own baby at this point, has never learned to actually look after himself by himself in the way that he should, in the way that adult men should be able to do. And so there's a real kind of toxic aspect to this parental relationship here that I think the mother is holding him back from being able to become an independent adult man. And so I can't imagine any self-respecting man who would rely on his mom to cut his nails. I think that's a little bit gross, but it says something quite bad about the actual relationship that they have with each other. That's one aspect to it. The other aspect is this really strange desire or the belief that the mother seems to have, where she thinks that the wife should come into this kind of maternal role in her son's life. And that's also a bit messed up. Essentially, I would argue that the relationship between a mother and son should be very, very different from the relationship between the son and his wife. And when these lines get a little bit crossed and the wife starts doing things that the mother would be doing for the son, then that's not a healthy relationship for any of them. So that's also quite messed up. The other thing, and it's almost a shame, in my opinion, because a lot of kids actually can do a lot of things by themselves from a really young age. And growing up, learning to be independent, learning to rely on yourself, learning to take responsibility are all things that are motivating and enjoyable and fun, and teach your kids to become contributing members to society. If you follow any methods, or if you've heard of any methods like the Montessori method, you'd be surprised to know just how much a 2-year-old is actually capable of doing for themselves without help from their parents if they're shown how to do it, and just how much happier those kids can be because they are not so reliant. You can imagine how frustrating it is when you want to have something done, but you're so reliant on your parents and on the people around you to do those things for you that you always have to wait. So on very many levels, this is one of those threads that's kind of sad to see, and I'm a little bit shocked by it. I don't know what I would do if I was the OP here. I think if this is someone that I'm seeing, I would question, I guess, if this type of behavior comes out in many of the other things that he does on a day-to-day basis, like how reliable is he as a man? Does he do his own laundry? Can he cook? these basic life skills, like, are those things that he has learned by himself at any point? And to what extent does he perceive it as a problem that his mother does these things? It's implied here from the thread that they live together, so he's probably hasn't moved out. But if you're thinking about continuing your relationship with this man, and hopefully you will because you have a baby together, that will have to change at some point, and he'll need to kind of grow up. So I hope he manages, and I hope the OP does not come across this kind of thing, does not have the struggle too often beyond that. Moving on. Would this bother you? My husband has a daughter from a previous relationship. He has a giant tattoo on his arm with her name. However, he doesn't want to get a tattoo of our daughter's name. His excuse is he doesn't want more tattoos. It makes me so mad. All I can think is one day our daughter is going to ask why he doesn't have her name, but he has her stepsister's. Am I being petty? Okay. Number one, she is not a stepsister. She is a half-sister. They are actually biological sisters. I think that this separation here that she makes between her and her sister is kind of a sad one, because it implies that she, as her daughter, should be worth more than the sister. Am I being petty? Yes, OP, you are being petty. I do get the point. I actually think that if he's a good person, if he's a good dad, he would be able to explain this to his daughter without much of a problem. I think it's fair enough to say, hey, there was a period of time in my life where I was really into this tattoo thing and I thought it was cool, but now when I got a bit older, I realized that that wasn't for me, and that maybe I could honor my relationship with my daughter in a different way, that I don't necessarily have to have it tattooed on my arm or on my body or somewhere permanent on my skin, because that does not diminish the relationship that I have with either of my daughters. And you can see that in terms of how he interacts with his daughters and the type of relationship that he's able to build with them over time. I don't think that this is a very difficult conversation to have. It sounds to me like this bothers you, like the OP, more than it would in theory bother the daughter. And this is one thing that adults do quite often, which kind of bugs me, which is when they sit there and they go, hey, but what about the child? And I'm not actually sure you're thinking about it too hard from your kid's perspective, because I think if you did think about it from your kid's perspective, you'd probably understand that the kid cares a lot more about the relationship that they have with their dad than the tattoos, and any other meaning that they assign to a tattoo is going to come from the adults in their life who explain it to them or who make comments to them, and the type of attitude that the adults have, that these are the things that they'll kind of soak up, because kids are sponges and they soak up whatever goes on around them. The very first response to this is, I get it, it would bother me too. And that still says to me that this is coming from the adults, that as the second partner, the second mother to one of his kids, you have this feeling of comparison, or you have an inherent need to compare yourself to his previous mother. And I totally get where that comes from. So one of the problems that I would argue comes up a lot with blended families, and probably something that you can't really avoid because that's one of the aspects of blended families. But if you feel a little bit insecure about your position, and if that's where this is coming from, then that's a totally different problem, and that should be dealt with in a very, very different way. But this is not the conversation to have about it. The second comment also says, I definitely see where you're coming from. However, was it a tattoo he got when he was young and doesn't have a lot of other tattoos? I could also see him not wanting more tattoos in that situation. But if he is loaded up with every other type of tattoo, then it's definitely strange. And even here, if he is loaded up with every other type of tattoo, I would argue that that's irrelevant. If he has decided that tattooing his daughter's names on his body is not something that he wants to continue doing, then that's totally within his rights. Now, if you have a second daughter, and then he tattoos the second daughter's name, but not the first one, then probably you can kind of ask what's up with that. Maybe he doesn't like that daughter especially much, but that would be a kind of a cruel way to make that point. Some people do say unequivocally, absolutely not. It's his body, his choice. He most likely changed his mindset, and that's okay. And I would fundamentally agree with that. I do think it's his choice, but I also think it's completely okay to say, hey, if this is a conflict that comes up with our daughter at some point in the future, then you're responsible for dealing with it, because that's fair enough. It's a question that she would have towards him and not towards anyone else. I don't think there was anything else in the comments. I'm not sure. I see both sides. I have a lot of tattoos and I just don't want any more, but I can also see where you're coming from. Try to let it go. Maybe when your daughter is older, she'll ask and he'll change his mind. That's a bit of a funny response, because the response here is, well, you know, maybe she'll manage to convince him to get one later on when she's a little bit older. Honestly, I don't think tattoos say much about the type of relationship that you have with your parents. And if he focuses his energy there on building a really good relationship with his kid, that it's not going to matter whether he has a tattoo or not. That's also the thing that's most important. Moving on. Ex-wife conversations. For those with a blended family, how often does your husband or spouse text their ex? Is it normal to have just random conversations throughout the day? I feel like my husband doesn't even text me as much. Not to mention, a couple months ago, she sent him a song by the artist that they used for their first dance about reconciling relationships. It's not that I don't trust him. I just don't trust her, and I think it's inappropriate. What should I do? It's not like I can just go read through his texts. I'd look crazy ridiculous, and honestly, don't think I want to. He always says I can, though. And then OP adds a second comment to this, saying, edit to also say, I've never read their messages, so for all I know, it could be about their daughter. But gosh, she's always popping up on his screen. So this is another one of those problems that I think come up really often because of the blended family part of the equation. I know that a lot of people can't help having blended families, and so, you know, if you end up in this situation, there's nothing that you can do other than work with what you have. So I get that, but I think it's really sad for everyone, because quite a lot of conflict kind of disappears the moment you have an actually stable long-term relationship, marriage, family structure that perseveres over time. But to tackle the actual question, when she says, what should I do? I actually think this is quite a simple answer, and the answer is to talk to your husband. I don't think that this is something that you can avoid. I really hate the statement, it's not that I don't trust him, I just don't trust her, and I think it's inappropriate, because it takes two people to make any kind of affair or cheating or relationship of any kind happen. And if you did trust him truly, then you wouldn't have this fear or discomfort with the situation. At the very least, it would, again, if you trusted him, it would be very easy to go up to him and say, hey, what are you guys talking about all day? Or I've noticed that you've been talking to your ex really often lately. Is everything okay? Is your daughter fine? Is there anything I can help with? I think that there are very different ways that you could respond to a situation, that you would respond to a situation if that trust really was there. So I would question that you actually trust your husband in this situation. Either way, the only way out is to talk to him about it. I don't think it's healthy to be trying to, you know, get glimpses of his texts, or to try and grab his phone and see if you can read everything without him knowing. I think all of this is totally unnecessary and totally unavoidable, and your gut will know. Like, if you sit down and actually talk to him about it, you'll know whether there's a problem there that you need to deal with or not. Hopefully not. Some of the comments here are very interesting. The very first one says, I think it honestly depends on their relationship. If they are good friends and they co-parent well, then I don't see a problem with it, as long as it's not inappropriate. I know several families who are like this, and it works well. And then OP here replies, he always says she is a C-word and could care less about her. She treated him really badly prior to cheating on him while she was pregnant, and eventually he left. That's why I don't get it. Now, everyone responds to this comment with, that's a red flag. And there, OP, I would completely agree. That does sound like a pretty big red flag. If people's relationship breaks down in a way that's toxic and unhealthy and with a lot of anger and bitterness, which I'm not surprised by, to be honest, I think that's how a lot of relationships do break down, then I would question, basically his actions don't match up with his words. So if he is really angry at her and he thinks that she was a terrible person and she treated him really badly and she cheated on him and that bitterness is there, then I don't think that they would be texting each other all day, even if it was about their daughter. I think that there would be a desire on both sides, or at the very least from his side, to keep that to a minimum. That said, this comment that you said here about she sent him a song by the artist that they used for their first dance about reconciling relationships, that one also sounds like a bit of a red flag. All of which is to say, I don't think that you would be having this question. I think most women in this situation would not be having this question if their intuition didn't say that there is probably something iffy about the situation going on. And intuition is something that I would trust in these types of relational things, which isn't to say that, hey, I would assume immediately that he's cheating, but that I think your gut says there's something iffy about this situation for a reason. And that's why you absolutely have to talk to him about it. There is this one statement here that I also wanted to point out. If you have a child with someone, they will always be your family. That's why I could never marry or seriously date someone who already had children with someone else. One person replies, I feel the exact same way. And then another person replies to that, this isn't true at all. Just because you share children doesn't mean you're family or have feelings for one another. This is basically encapsulates what I meant when I said I think a lot of these problems are the types of problems that people have when they have blended families. I think there's always lines that are going to be crossed. There's always going to be this question, like this element of comparison, like we had with the previous case, this element of comparison with the previous relationship where you're like, okay, maybe he liked her more, or maybe she liked him more. Like, it doesn't really matter which side of the equation that happens on. They absolutely will always be your family. Like, the moment that you share kids with someone, then that person will always be their parent, no matter what you do. And I don't think that it's healthy to try and approach that type of relationship with the perspective of they're not family anymore just because they're your ex. They are 100% going to be your family. At the very least, that's the ideal way of dealing with it. Because if you treat them like family, then you'll also interact with them on a very different level. That said, I think it's fair enough to say just because you share children doesn't mean you still have feelings for one another. Maybe I would not distrust anyone who claims that to be the case, but I do think it's hard. I think it's very difficult to go through the whole process of having kids with someone and then completely switch how you feel about them. And I think that this kind of bitterness and hatred and vitriol that comes up from those relationships breaking down is actually proof of that, because I think either the whole love-hate equation being separated by a very thin line, I think that's where that comes from. So I think that's a little bit dodgy. But yes, I totally understand where this person is coming from with regards to, I could never marry or seriously date someone who has already had children with someone else. I hope that she's never in the situation where she has to do that, because that would suck. Or at least it would be a lot more difficult to manage. Okay, moving on. Quote, this is the title of the thread, is this quote: "She only prefers mom because that's where the food is." I've had a decent relationship with my mother-in-law, but she's been driving me insane ever since I had my twin girls in November. She has been extremely overbearing, wanting to be over to see them practically every day of the week, insisting that she needs to be able to take them to her house so they can see grandma's house, making obnoxious kissy noises over FaceTime and in person when she sees them, just so obnoxious at all times. But today I was really upset because one baby girl was crying and I took her to console her. My mother-in-law insisted she was hungry. I just fed her. So my DH here is dear husband. My husband informed her that she has been a little fussy lately and just prefers her mama over anyone else. Mother-in-law then feels the need to say, oh, that's only because she knows that's where the food is. Like, excuse me. I'm proud and grateful that I'm able to breastfeed my girls, but that is not all I'm here for. She prefers me because I carried her for 9 months and she feels safe and comfortable with me, not because I'm just a food service. Just needed a little vent session because I'm so over her. I don't know, maybe it's just the hormones, but I've really had enough. Oof. Now, this is one of those situations. Obviously, a lot of conflict happens between, let's say, mothers and their mother-in-law for very many reasons. And I think that some aspect of that is hormonal. I think some aspect of that is the desire, especially of a new mother, to assert herself in her relationship, to find her own standing in terms of as a mother and to build her own types of relationship with her kids. And all parents will experience this, where pretty much everyone always, or every other parent at least, has an opinion about how you should be raising your kids, and learning to create boundaries and to understand to what extent should you take advice on board versus when should you say, no thanks, we've got it, is definitely a lesson that's quite difficult for a lot of parents to learn. And I'm 100% one of those people as well. And you can also very clearly tell in this situation that the source of the conflict is quite complicated. Just the line, just so obnoxious at all times. You can hear the frustration in the way that she phrases it, and things like making obnoxious kissy noises. Like, these are things that kids don't care about at all. It's just that you as an adult, when you sit there and you watch it and you listen to it and you see how someone's interacting with your kids, and you're like, oh, why are you doing this? I get where she's coming from. All that said, I actually think the statement, I mean, I understand the statement was said as though it's an insult, and that's why you take offense to it. But I don't think that the statement itself is that bad. Or at the very least, I don't think it's wrong. I suspect that to some extent, the level of anger that she feels is probably directly related to the fact that it's kind of based in reality to a large extent. I think that motherhood is really hard, at the very least, a baby's attachment to his mother is very hard to separate from the experience of motherhood, from the biological reality aspect of motherhood, which means, yes, babies are very attached to their mothers because they do get carried in the womb for 9 months. You can imagine, especially as a very vulnerable and like from the very early beginning of when they start being able to perceive things, they can hear their mother's heartbeat. They start hearing their mother's voice. They are obviously comforted by the fact that they're in the womb. It feels all comfortable and cozy and safe, and it's all built to feel like that for them. And then when they're born, that attachment continues. They still recognize her smell. They still recognize her voice from when they were in the womb. And breastfeeding, actually, which I know is a shocker to a lot of people nowadays, because we have things like formula and people pump and people nurse with bottles quite a lot. Like the number of bottles that you can see in a store when you go to the baby section is quite crazy. Breastfeeding is actually part of that process, that for the baby, as far as the baby is concerned, when he's nursed, it's not just food. And I think that this is the problem that a lot of people have, or the reason that a lot of people take this type of statement as an insult. Breastfeeding comes with a much deeper connection to the mother. It has a lot, like all the comfort and care of being held to another human being, the skinship of it, skin to skin contact. All of these are aspects of it as well. You cannot separate the baby's attachment to you as a mother from the fact that you are the mother, physically and biologically speaking. Which again is not to say that adoptive parents don't also build relationships with their kids, and it's also not to say that babies can't be attached to other adults in their life for any other reason. It doesn't diminish any of that, but it is one aspect of breastfeeding and nursing that is, you just can't avoid it. It's just how it works. And so I don't think that this is an insult. I actually also think this idea of just food is kind of sad, and it does not even reflect how we as adults interact with food. If you think about the way that a lot of our festivals have some kind of association with food, a lot of the family gatherings will always be around a meal. Food for us is an extremely social thing as well. So it's not just that it's not just that it's fuel for our bodies to then, function. And it's pretty much the same for a baby, just in a completely different way, and in a way that I think is even more meaningful and even deeper and even more joyful than the way that we as adults interact with food. So that's what I would say to the statement itself. All that said, I completely understand where the anger is coming from, and you'll see pretty much all the comments are on the mother side here. The top comment is, please cover up, your jealousy is showing, which is fair enough. I guess that might be the case. And then everyone else takes it as, wow, the disrespect is crazy. What did you say back to her? I would have snapped at her. That comment was so rude. Can you limit the frequency of getting together? And then this is an example response. Wow, that was incredibly rude. Don't expect to be around my children if that's how you plan to behave. Ugh. I think that's a really sad statement. I think this is completely sad. And again, I totally understand it. I understand that it was, at least it sounds like, oh, that's only because she knows that's where the food is. I know it sounds like it was intended to be insulting, or at least diminishing in some way. I think the mother-in-law here maybe was trying to bring down the mom a little bit, or to reduce the relationship that she has with her baby. And that's kind of sad. And maybe it is motivated by jealousy, envy, and all of these other things. So I understand where the anger is coming from. But I do think that sometimes when you hear these statements and you want to take offense at them, there's not like that. It's not a problem. So what? So what if the baby really, really likes being with you as a mother because you nurse him? Or nurse her. That's not a bad thing. Something to be proud of. Okay. This one is titled, I want to get a nanny, but my husband is against it. She did a couple of updates that I'll scroll up to read as well, but I wanted to read the first post that she made first and talk about that before responding to the others. This is about an overbearing hubby, i.e. husband. So my husband works full-time. I have some time off because before starting school, but time off is really an overstatement because I have no time for myself. I love my little one. I love my baby to death, but I want to have time to do things like exercise, read, cook, go get a haircut, shower, the basics. I really want to get a part-time nanny to help take care of baby so I can have some time for myself before starting school. My husband is against it because, hear this, he says the baby sleeps most of the time, and when he's up, I need to nurse. What will a nanny do anyways? Thing is, my baby is almost 4 months now. He's awake longer, he needs constant entertainment. Yes, he sleeps, but for short periods. My husband's other argument, ask his parents for help. Our in-laws are currently living with us, and in fact, they're here to help out with baby. But every time I want to pee or shower, I don't want to ask for help. It's time-consuming and inconvenient, and I don't feel comfortable asking for help unless it's something I need to do, like pee, and not something I want to do, like read or nap. We can afford a nanny, but my husband is against it. He says, just ask the in-laws for help because it's better to have family to watch the baby than a stranger. I'm also pretty sure it's a money thing. He thinks it's a waste of money to spend money on a nanny when his parents can help for free. My question is he right? Should I just suck it up and ask our in-laws for help when I need it? Is me wanting someone designated to help like a nanny not the best use of resources instead of asking them for help? I'm too close to this to judge whether what I want is unreasonable. Any thoughts are appreciated, and please no mean comments. Okay, so my knee-jerk response is if your in-laws are living with you, and again, I hope you have a pretty decent relationship with your in-laws if they're living with you, then this is completely a nonsensical and unreasonable request. If you have a 4-month-old and you want time to go exercise, read, go get a haircut, do any of these things, then it's not that complicated to go to the in-laws. You can also schedule it in advance if you would rather and say, hey, next week on this day, would you maybe have a couple of hours free to watch my baby, your grandkid, for a little period of time? And I can guarantee you that the vast majority of grandparents, if they're decent grandparents, would not have a problem with that. So I completely understand where the husband is coming from here. I do actually think it's a huge waste of money. And that for me would be the primary argument more than anything else. I think the statement, we can afford a nanny, but he's against it, yes, being able to afford something doesn't necessarily mean that you should spend your money on that thing, because maybe you can afford other things with the same money that you would actually need. So that's my response. Unsurprisingly, that was also the response of most people here, because at the very least, from what you've said, there's no reason to assume that you have a problem with your in-laws. That said, if I'll scroll past a couple of people here, this person says, I disagree with the previous poster who says, yes, I'm on the husband's side and your husband. I want to be able to give directions regarding my baby and have them followed. I don't want to have to justify why I want to do something, or justify where I have been and why it took longer than expected. I definitely prefer hired help to family. Oof. These types of statements always sound to me like people have pretty major problems with their family members, and I think it's quite sad. I would never prefer someone that I hired over having a family member look after my child. And I honestly find it quite difficult to imagine why you would or how you would. I think that these points of, I want to be able to give directions and have them followed. I do get the point that sometimes you want a little bit more control over the situation. And when other people are also like family, then they will feel like they can make decisions regarding the baby's welfare that maybe you wouldn't agree with. But honestly, I don't think that the majority of people do that. If you have good reasons for what you want, if you have a good relationship, like that is kind of the foundation of this. So long as you're able to interact with your in-laws and to explain to them what you like, what you don't like, or they understand how you want to raise your kid, then it's not a problem. And honestly, I also don't actually think it's a huge problem if grandparents do something that's a little bit different from how you would do it as the parent, if they're watching your kid for a couple of hours and it's not, for days on end. A couple of these statements that also, a couple of other comments that back up this person. There's a reason you're not asking for help. You'd be dependent on working around their schedule and needs. And that, I think, yeah, but in the same way that, it just, if you make any kind of trade with anyone for anything, if you ask anyone for anything, you're always going to be dependent on their schedule. I don't think getting a nanny or a babysitter is that different, because you still need them to be available. Free help is nice, this person says, but it usually comes with its own price, no matter how well you get along with them. Even if the nanny was hired for only 2 to 3 hours a day, you would get some time to take care of you without feeling bad about it. And then one person also replies and backs this up. It is always worth the money to be able to set clear expectations and know they will be followed, and that expressing those things won't result in you being painted in a negative light. When it comes to family, free help is never actually free. And that, my people, is the breakdown of family in action. For all the people say, hey, it takes a village to raise a child, the kinds of attitudes and relationships that people have with their family seem to really work against that. And I think that that's a huge shame. It's really, really sad. To go back to the OP and kind of go through her updates here, because I think that she makes her first update was she was annoyed that people said, hey, your husband is right. Her second update says, thank you to everyone who posted helpful comments. I took the advice and asked my in-laws to watch her at a set time. This way I don't have to ask them every time I want to get something done. I realized some context was missing. The reason I was hesitant about asking for their help is because when they've watched her, they've complained about how difficult it was. So I just end up not seeking their help. But as someone said here, free help comes with its baggage. And to those that claim I'm entitled and spoiled for wanting time to myself, it's too bad you think a mother carving out time for herself is to be frowned upon. To those who said, I just wanted people to agree with me, well, I have nothing to say to you other than so much for seeking help from a supportive community of women. To the rest of you, my honest thanks. I've started to have some time to myself every now and then. I'm starting to feel much better and be a better mom and person all around. I do think this is a little bit mean. I think that she is a little bit spoiled in that if you were not in the situation where your husband is able to afford, like clearly because she's not working right now, her husband is bringing in the money, and therefore her husband is the reason that she would, in theory, be able to afford a nanny. I think that a little bit of privilege comes with that, and that's fine. I don't think it's a problem to be in the situation where you can consider getting a nanny for yourself. and to have like to think about it is completely fair. So yes, maybe there's nothing wrong with being a little bit spoiled if your situation if your financial situation can support that, right? So I don't think that that's a huge problem. I get why she was a little bit upset, but I also understand why other people who are way more stressed out, who have way more limited resources, might take it in that kind of way. Fundamentally, though, I mean, the outcome that she came out with in terms of asking her in-laws to watch her baby for some periods of time is completely reasonable. And yes, maybe free help comes with baggage, but it's in the same way that doing favors for anyone kind of comes with baggage. I don't think it does. I think what you do is that you build a much deeper bond that's based on doing things for each other because you care about each other and because you want each other to have a good time. And I don't think that that's bad. And in general, wanting some time for yourself as a new and young mother is also like, yeah, sure. I think that it's good for people to recognize what it is they need in their life when they are parents as well, rather than just kind of going along with the expectations of being like, oh no, I should be around my kid 100% of the time, which isn't to say that you can't choose to be around your kid 100% of the time. If that works for you, just whatever works for you, it's good to be aware of it and to work with it. So yes, that was this thread. And so we'll go to the final one for today. What's with the need for firsts? So yesterday we found out we are having a boy. We have a little girl already. When we got home, we informed the family. My parents, because they were watching our daughter, we called father-in-law and brother-in-law. Then my husband called his mum. I guess she's upset she's never the first to find out, and that's with good reason because she likes to rub it into people's faces. For example, when we found out we were pregnant with our daughter, she immediately went and bought clothes, and I bawled because it turned out I was only 10 weeks and was still scared about possible miscarriage. She brought the clothes over to rub into father-in-law's face that she brought the first clothes. Plus, she shared our personal information to strangers before. Today I ran into her at the store and she informed me she bought a onesie. No big deal, right? Well, she told me she only bought it because she wanted to be the first to do something. It was a nightmare with my daughter, her overstepping and trying to do first, and I thought we got it under control. Guess I was wrong. Only satisfaction I got was to burst her bubble when I told her we already bought some clothes yesterday. Why are they so intent on having firsts? They already had their kids. Sorry, I'm just annoyed that I'm back to square one with this woman again. Now, at this point, I would probably say that I think both sides are a little bit petty. The response of, the only satisfaction I got was to burst her bubble when I told her we already bought some clothes yesterday. I think that says that's a little bit of a petty response, a little bit spiteful. The fact that the mother-in-law is really obsessed with being the first to do something just so she can go and rub it into someone else's face and kind of show herself out to be special because she did something first, or because she knew about the baby first, or because of whatever other reason, also sounds a little bit petty. And so honestly, I don't think either side here has a leg to stand on when it comes to this. One thing I do find quite sad, when we were pregnant and she went and bought clothes and she cried, the OP here cried because she was only 10 weeks pregnant and she was really scared about getting a miscarriage. That is heartbreaking as a thought, and shows to me or suggests to me that maybe how you were really intense from the anxiety side there, that maybe you were a little bit too anxious about the potential of a miscarriage, because whether or not the mother-in-law buys clothes is not going to influence whether you have a miscarriage or not. So yeah, maybe it's good to separate. Although again, maybe next time don't tell your mother-in-law that you're pregnant until you're ready to share it properly and you're not scared about other people running with it, which is what most people do when they find out about pregnancies. Also, this statement, why are they so intent on having firsts? Honestly, I think it's mostly motivated by just sheer joy and nostalgia and the desire to experience the things that you experienced, 20, 30 years ago when you first had your own kids again. I think that I completely understand where that's coming from. I think kids bring so much joy in life to people's lives that when they have the prospect of another child coming, they kind of have that response to it. Again, which isn't to say that some people are not overbearing, and definitely some people take it way overboard, and I understand why you need to say, hey, okay, this is enough. We can stop here. But I think that's where that urge comes from. The comments are a little bit harsh. They'll say some things like, they do it to make it about themselves, or to have this weird connection with your baby. I don't know, or some weird connection in general that they're the only one in. And I don't know. I think there is maybe some level here where I'd say assumption of good faith is not a bad way to interact with the people in your life, at the very least the people who are family and related to your kid, who want to be spending time with your kid. I was literally about to say lie and say you got clothes already. Like I actually think that if you start participating in that competition, then you are not doing anything to stop it. You're just participating in it, and you're trying to reinforce it, and you're making it worse. And I don't think that there's any problem with saying, yeah, sure, you got the first onesie. Like if that gives her some kind of happiness or satisfaction in her life, you don't need to take that away from her. It's fine. It doesn't take anything away from you as a mother if other people buy clothes for your baby. And that's okay. One comment here that I found quite sad. I'd never put baby in anything that she bought just to rub in people's faces. I think fair enough. The mother-in-law is very petty with that, but honestly, again, it's just clothes. The clothes don't mean anything. It's really not a problem. Some people will add here with their stories in terms of like, yeah, it's jealousy, because of self-importance, or it's motivated by self-importance, and maybe some aspect of it is that. But I think it's true that people like to feel a little bit special and a little bit important when these things happen as well, and share with their friends that they're about to become grandparents and so on. And I don't think that it's so much that they want to brag, but that it does give them a little bit of a kick and a little bit of a joy to have that as an experience, and that's okay. So yes, maybe this is one of those situations that no one needs to take all that seriously, and it's okay to just let some things go. And it's fine if people buy things that you don't use. It's fine if they buy things that you don't like. It's not so fine to buy things to run over to other people and be like, ha ha ha, look, I bought the thing. But maybe that's then the core of the problem, and that's the type of issue that you should have with it, rather than trying to reduce her excitement in some kind of way. Thanks for listening.